My name is Maribel Quinn. I'm 68 years old, and for most of my life, I was the quiet half of a pair that built something honest, 27 acres of apple trees in Ellenshire Valley, Oregon. My husband Ellis liked to call it a legacy in the making. We started with 6 saplings and a rented tiller. 40 years later, those trees fed 3 farmers' markets, supplied 2 school lunch programs, and shaded every memory that mattered. Ellis passed away last Tuesday. Pancreatic cancer. Quick but cruel. He'd been in pain longer than he let on, and I think part of him thought if he didn't say it out loud, he could still walk 1 more row with the pruning shears in hand. I buried him beside the northern fence line, where the wind always carried the scent of cider and soil. He wanted it simple. Just the land, the trees, and no speeches. After the funeral, people brought casseroles and condolences, and then they left. I washed the same 3 plates for 3 days. I left his flannel shirts folded in the laundry basket just the way they were before the hospital stays. No one touched them. Colton, our son, stayed in the guest room, with his Bluetooth earpiece never fully out of reach. Lana, our daughter, moved through the kitchen like she was filming a lifestyle video, pausing to stage her tea mug before snapping a photo. They hugged me with shoulders tight and eyes elsewhere. When I offered to go through Ellis's old papers with them, they smiled politely, said we'd talk in the morning. But that night, I sat alone at our old oak table, just me and the hum of the fridge. Their laughter from the den floated upstairs, but none of it felt like home anymore. I clutched the mug Ellis carved in our first year, still stained at the rim, and waited for the warmth to come back. It didn't. Not from the tea. Not from the house. Not from them. In the morning, I brewed Ellis's favorite coffee, the simple kind, dark and plain, and set out 3 mugs. I was still hoping they might remember who we were before they became strangers with my last name. Colton came downstairs first, already dressed in a crisp blazer and slacks, the kind of outfit that made him look like he belonged in a boardroom, not a breakfast nook. He glanced at the mugs I'd set out, picked one up without a word, and sat across from me. Lana followed. Moments later, silk blouse tucked neatly into high-waisted pants, her heels too polished for this kitchen. She didn't sit right away, just hovered behind her brother phone, in hand, thumb tapping at a screen she didn't bother to hide. "I hope you slept okay," I said quietly, not expecting a real answer. Colton nodded once. "Yeah. We were talking last night. About what I asked, though, I already had a feeling." He placed his mug down with that quiet, rehearsed precision he inherited from Ellis. "It's time to start settling things, Mom. The house, the orchard, the estate. We wanted to go over everything with you." Lana finally sat, folding her hands neatly over a yellow folder she'd brought in from the den. Her voice was smooth. "We just want what's best for everyone." "What's best?" Colton echoed, opening the folder. "This is what Dad wanted." Inside was a typed document, clean and pressed. His company's letterhead was stamped at the top. My name wasn't there, not in the title, not in the body. Just Colton and Lana listed as primary successors to Quinn Orchard Holdings. My stomach turned. "He signed this a year ago," Colton said. "When things started getting harder. He couldn't even write clearly 6 months ago," I replied, my voice flat. "That signature looks..." "He was lucid," Lana cut in. "He wanted you to have peace, Mom. There's this beautiful place, Sunny Grove Estates. They've got activities, walking paths, your own private garden. He told you about Sunny Grove." Colton looked at me like I'd asked whether apples came from trees. "We did the research." I stared at the paper again. The signature was too smooth, too perfect. My name missing entirely. "I see," I said quietly, folding my hands in my lap to stop them from shaking. Lana leaned forward. "We can help you pack this weekend. We'll make it easy." I nodded, but only slightly. I wasn't agreeing. I was memorizing. Colton smiled like the deal was done. "We want you to be comfortable, Mom. That's all." I rose and gathered the mugs. Let me clean up first, I said, turning to the sink with Ellis's favorite dish towel in hand. The quiet in the room thickened. They didn't notice that I didn't pour out my coffee. I carried it with me upstairs. The next morning, the house was too quiet. I didn't hear Colton's usual conference calls or Lana's voice floating through the hall while she filmed her daily affirmations. Just the soft sound of wheels gliding over hardwood, my suitcase being rolled down the hallway. I walked into the foyer to see Colton zipping it up Lana beside him with that same pleasant expression she wore at Ellis's memorial. They were already dressed. Ready? We packed some essentials, Lana said brightly. Thought we'd take a drive down to Sunnygrove today. Just to look. No pressure? Of course, I said, steadying my voice. Let me grab my medication and a few photos. No need, Colton said. We packed those too. Your pills are in the side pocket. We'll ship anything else you decide to keep. I nodded, moving slowly, not because I needed to, but because I was remembering. Every framed photo they hadn't touched, every keepsake they'd left behind. What they thought I needed was so small. What I had kept, they had no idea existed. The ride started quiet. Lana hummed along to a playlist of soft instrumental music, Colton driving with both hands at 10 and 2, like always. We passed the orchard, the feed store, the post office. The road curved east, then veered onto a narrow 2-lane highway I'd rarely taken. After 20 minutes, Colton turned onto a gravel path that wound between pine trees and dipped behind an old logging area. No buildings, no signage. When he pulled over, dust curled around us. I waited. He didn't turn off the engine. "This is where you get off, Mom," he said, without looking at me. Lana's smile cracked slightly. "Colton? What?" "She'll contest the will, make scenes." "This is cleaner," he replied. "She has her meds, her coat. There's a gas station about 5 miles up." He stepped out and opened my door. For a second, I didn't move. Then I reached for the suitcase, stood and looked into the woods. They got back in the car, and without another word, they drove away. I stood still until the engine was gone. No phone, no money, but I smiled just slightly, because what I carried in my purse wasn't bitterness. It was the deed, folded tightly, still warm from where it had rested against my side. It had been Ellis's idea, though he never called it that. Just in case he said, one summer evening, when the drought had stretched too long and the bank had sent a second letter. We were barely keeping the orchard afloat back then, living on borrowed time and borrowed trucks. That night, he sat at the edge of our bed, hands streaked with grease from fixing the tractor, and told me to think ahead, not for fear Mari, just for protection. The next week, while Ellis bartered for a used pump motor, I met with a quiet notary in town and signed for 22 acres just west of our original parcel. The land had no orchard, but it had something more valuable, the spring-fed stream that supplied water for the whole valley. I bought it in my maiden name, Maribel Shore, and registered it separately. No one but Ellis knew. Not Colton, not Lana, not even Harold, our lawyer. Just me and the man who understood that not all safeguards came in the form of insurance. We stored the deed in a fireproof box behind a false panel in the medicine cabinet, next to an emergency key and a flash drive, with our will's letters and passwords. Ellis was methodical like that. He worried about break-ins, but more than that, he worried about being forgotten, about us being outmaneuvered by people who didn't love the land the way we did. After the cancer came, he never mentioned the box again. I think he assumed I would remember. And I did. When Colton handed me that corporate printed will too, polished to be real, I knew what I had to do. I didn't grab clothes or jewelry when I packed for that car ride. I took the fireproof box, slipped it into the lining of an old canvas bag, and kept it close. Now standing by the road gravel crunching beneath my flats, I pressed my hand to that bag like a heartbeat. That document inside wasn't just paper. It was leverage. It was the artery of the orchard. They had taken what they could see, the house, the business, my name from the front gate. But they had left behind the one thing that made it all possible, the water, and the woman who knew where it flowed. I adjusted the strap on my shoulder, turned away from the direction of the gas station, and began walking toward town. The road curved endlessly through the pines' gravel, turning to cracked pavement under the weight of each step. My feet ached, but the pain kept me alert. I walked with the fireproof box pressing into my side, a steady reminder that I wasn't lost. I was heading toward something. 2 hours later, the faded sign of Miller's General came into view, leaning slightly to the left, like it had for the last 30 years. The screen door still creaked. Ray Miller stood behind the register, wiping his hands on a towel that had once been white. "Maribel," he said, brow furrowed. "You look like you've walked here from the edge of the county." I didn't explain. I just asked, "Do you still keep prepaid phones behind the counter?" He nodded slowly, stepping out and guiding me toward the shelf. "You need anything else?" "A bottle of water," I said, voice hoarse. "And a quiet place to make a call." He handed me the bottle and motioned toward the little office in the back. The rotary phone still hung on the wall, stubborn as ever. I dialed Harold's number by memory. It rang once. Jennings Law. "It's Maribel," I said. There was a pause on the other end. "I've been trying to reach you. I was told you wouldn't be attending the will reading. I wasn't told there was one." He exhaled sharply. "Colton presented a version I don't recognize. I flagged it. It didn't match what Ellis and I finalized last year. I need your help," I said, quietly. "You'll have it," he replied. "Come by my office in an hour. Bring whatever you have." I thanked him and hung up. Ray handed me the phone box and the bottle. "On the house," he said. I nodded and walked back out into the sunlight, my feet swollen, but my spine straighter than it had been in days. The truth was no longer a quiet weight in my bag. It was finally moving forward. Harold Jennings still kept his office above the florist on Main Street. The door creaked the same way it always had, and his secretary, Helen, gave me a startled look when I stepped inside. She didn't ask questions, just offered me a glass of water and ushered me back to Harold's room. He rose from his chair when he saw me, not with surprise, but with quiet urgency. "Come in," he said, motioning to the armchairs by the window. "Tell me everything." So I did. From the breakfast conversation to the folder with the signature too perfect to be real to the car ride and the roadside gravel. I spoke plainly without embellishment, but each word seemed to sink heavier into the room. When I finished, I unzipped the canvas bag and removed the fireproof box. Harold leaned in as I handed him the original deed, creased but intact. "In your maiden name," he said softly, reading the registration. "And these 22 acres include the water source. They always have." Ellis knew. He looked up. "This isn't just land, Maribel. This is control. This is non-negotiable leverage." He turned to his desk, flipping open his planner. The signature on the will Colton submitted didn't sit right with me. It was too smooth, too steady. I've seen Ellis's writing deteriorate for over a year. It's a forgery. We'll have it examined formally, but for now." He picked up the phone and called the county clerk. Within minutes, he was filing an emergency injunction to freeze any transfer of assets tied to the orchard. "Developers hate lawsuits," he said, scribbling notes on a legal pad. "They especially hate incomplete land rights." He drafted a letter addressed to the firm Colton and Lana had approached. It was short, direct, and outlined the undisclosed ownership of the water source. By late afternoon, a courier had delivered it across state lines. Before the sun dipped below the courthouse roof, Harold's office line rang twice, once from the developer's legal team, and once from Colton's personal number. Harold didn't answer the second one. Instead, he looked at me and said, "They're going to realize what you've done." I nodded and folded my hands quietly in my lap as he returned to drafting the motion. By evening, I had checked into a quiet room above the bakery on Linden Street. It smelled faintly of cinnamon and yeast, and the window overlooked the town square where Ellis once sold our first bushels of apples from a rusted flatbed truck. I didn't unpack. The prepaid phone buzzed around 10. One message. "Lana, Mom. Can we talk? I didn't know about the other land." Please. There was no apology. Just panic, wrapped in politeness. I set the phone down on the windowsill and didn't respond. Harold called the next morning. "Colton rang 3 times last night," he said. "He's demanding to speak with you directly." "Let him demand," I said. "From now on, it's all through you." Harold chuckled softly. Good. That's exactly what I told him. By noon, the developer's firm had responded formally to Harold's letter. They were withdrawing interest, citing unresolved ownership issues and potential fraud. One sentence stood out in the memo. Harold read aloud to me. "We do not proceed with partial or contested land rights." It wasn't victory. Not yet, but it was the first stone falling. That afternoon, I walked to the library to return a book Ellis never finished. On my way out, I passed the bench outside Town Hall where 2 women from the garden club were whispering behind their hands. Heard it was forged. Her son tried to sell it all before the ink was dry. I didn't stop. I didn't need to. Word was spreading. The kind of story that blooms slowly in a town like Ellenshire, quiet and persistent as moss on stone. Back in the bakery, I made tea and sat by the window as twilight settled. The phone buzzed again. "Lana, we didn't mean to hurt you. We were just trying to make things easier. For everyone." I turned off the phone and slid it into the drawer. Let them feel the silence. I reached into my canvas bag and pulled out the deed again. Not to read it, just to hold it. Not out of pride, but clarity. They had gambled on my absence, and now they were learning what it felt like to lose something they assumed they'd already won. The apartment above the bakery had just enough space for a bed, a table, and a narrow balcony barely wide enough to turn around on. But it faced the morning sun, and that was enough. I bought clay pots from the hardware store and filled them with basil thyme and marigolds. Nothing fancy, just something to tend. I watered them with an old glass pitcher and spoke to them the way I used to speak to Ellis, softly and without needing answers. The town hadn't changed much. People still waved from their porches. Teenagers still loitered outside the ice cream shop, pretending not to see anyone they knew. But they looked at me differently now, not with pity, but with something quieter. Respect, maybe. I began teaching again. Gardening classes at the community center on Wednesdays, quilting on Saturdays. I kept it simple. Hands-on. Local. No sign-up sheets, no fees. Just a chalkboard and whoever showed up. At the library, I found my old volunteer badge still in a drawer. They didn't ask questions when I offered to help with the after-school reading hour. They just smiled and handed me a stack of picture books. One afternoon, I passed by the orchard on my way back from the co-op. The gates were still locked. No new signs. No construction crews. The trees looked wild, like they didn't quite know who they belonged to anymore. I didn't stop. I didn't need to. The truth was, I wasn't waiting for permission to live again. I had started over with the same hands that once built everything I thought I'd lost. And this time I wasn't building for anyone else's name. The papers weren't complicated. Harold helped me draw them up over 2 visits, making sure every clause was clear. When it was done, I signed the water rights over to the Ellenshire Valley Agricultural Cooperative, a trust built by local growers, not corporations. The land would remain untouchable. No developer could split it. No contract could hide it. The stream that once nourished our orchard would now nourish the next generation, and they in turn would protect it. Harold offered to notify Colton and Lana, but I told him not to. They'd find out eventually. Some things didn't need announcements, just action. In the months that followed, I found myself becoming part of things again, not as someone's wife or mother, not as a widow, but as Maribel Quinn, the woman who remembered how to dig and plant and teach. Teenagers from the high school showed up with notebooks and dirt under their nails. Retired teachers brought their own seeds to share. Even young couples came hopeful, a little unsure, asking how to test soil or prune for late frost. I showed them. Not because I owed them anything, but because it felt right. One Saturday, I received a thank you basket from the co-op. Inside were jars of jam, a burlap bag of flour, and a note handwritten in careful block letters. For Miss Maribel, who saved the water, and the rest of us too. I set the basket on my balcony table and watered the marigolds again. The orchard no longer needed to be mine on paper. It lived on through every hand that touched the soil. And I had finally made peace with the idea that some legacies grow best when you let go. I still think about that road sometimes. The gravel pressing into the soles of my shoes, the sound of my children's car fading into dust. That moment should have broken me. Maybe once it would have, but standing there alone with a suitcase I didn't pack, I didn't feel small. I felt awake. They thought they were ending something. What they did, what they said, was supposed to be final. But it wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of one I wrote myself. I never raised my voice. I never threw anything. I didn't beg. I walked. And with every step, I remembered who I was before they tried to shrink me down to mom and burden. Before I handed away my time, my name, and my place at the table just to keep peace, they underestimated what silence can hold. If you're reading this or hearing it, and you've ever been left behind, cast aside, or written out of your own life, I hope you remember this much. Quiet does not mean powerless. Grace does not mean surrender. I found my strength the day they let go of me, because that's when I let go of needing to be chosen. This is where I begin, not at the front door of the house they tried to sell, but in the morning sun on my balcony, with a cup of plain coffee and a name I never stopped carrying, my own